Minister, a very warm welcome to euronews.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The burning question is, who is responsible for the attacks that we've seen in the UAE's waters? The US has been quick to point the finger. We know you have an investigation ongoing with the French and the US, but what is your instinct telling you?
We're conducting an investigation. We have French help, we have US help and cooperation also, along with our national bodies here. So again, I don't want to really speculate on that, and especially that it is coming at a very sensitive period in the region, and I think that it'll be quite unwise for me to speculate. I think what we need to look at is de-escalating. I think we need to look at the current situation with a lot of wisdom and prudence. So clearly we will be very clear with the results of the investigation. My understanding that we should come out with it in the next couple of days.
The US says that it doesn't want war, but it has deployed warships to the Gulf. So what do these actions tell us?
There's been a lot of statements and counter-statements, and if you look at the plethora of Iranian statements that basically contradict each other, it doesn't really help. The way that the UAE will deal with this is to try and be objective and try to be rational in addressing the current situation. Nobody wants war, but we have to also be very clear. We are where we are today mainly because of Iranian behavior. This is an accumulation of Iranian behavior in the region, of playing the role of the bully, of interfering in Arab affairs, of not admitting that really and acknowledging that it is their behavior that has led to some of the most biting sanctions that they are suffering from.
The US says that it won't hesitate to defend its interests if they're threatened. Does the UAE consider itself one of those interests, and have you had diplomatic guarantees, assurances from the White House that you are?
We will work very hard politically and diplomatically not to reach that point. But again, we are quite sure of our capabilities and of our networks of friends. So clearly, this is something that we don't want to test. We don't want to test our capabilities, and we don't want to test our network of friends, but we are assured of them. But clearly, I think there's a lot that we can do through diplomacy. There's a lot that we can do through common sense, and we will do that as we have done, navigating a very difficult region for a long time.
A fifth of the global oil consumption passes through the Strait of Hormuz. It's such a strategic choke point. What message would you send to the commodity markets and even the global equity markets that are feeling uneasy at this time, given the situation?
Well, I think the unease is natural, but I think also these markets understand that the Gulf has had more than its share of turbulence. It has seen it before. But I think the message to the markets will be really how we manage this. And this is why really at different levels, de-escalating and dealing with this with prudence and using politics as a main mechanism in doing all this is all necessary, because it sends different messages not only at the military and political plane, but it does also at the economic plane.
Looking at the Yemen, Sudan, also the situation in Libya, you say that you're misunderstood, that the media has somehow got it wrong, your policies are misinterpreted. So how so? Why do you feel criticised, and what is the involvement worth for the UAE?
No, I think I don't want to generalise with the media. I think that this is a very polarised period in Arab politics, I think. But fundamentally, I think what is necessary to emphasize is what is really driving our foreign policy. What is driving our foreign policy are very, very simple rules. Number one rule is the necessity for stability in the region. I think number two rule is that after a very turbulent Arab Spring, the necessity that transition has to be peaceful, that we need to maintain and support the institutions of states, because once these are lost, they are very difficult to recreate. It's very easy for somebody from outside the region to pontificate on the region, but we have seen in many cases where basically the fundamentals of a functioning state are lost, and it's chaos for a decade or two. And this is very, very difficult in various areas in the Arab world. So I think that this is fundamentally where we are working. I think Sudan is a case in point where clearly a very timely support for Sudan of $3 billion from Saudi Arabia and the UAE came to help in a very, very difficult and what I would call fluid and fragile situation.
You speak of the aid that's been sent. Sudan needs so much more. Will you be sending more? Will Saudi?
Again, I think if you look at our track record, we've always been one of the most constructive countries, along with Saudi Arabia and Kuwait here, I have to mention, in stabilizing and helping. Our role in Sudan, other areas in the Arab world, will continue. Our main aim is the stability of the neighborhood because we live in this neighborhood. So the more peaceful, more stable it is, we also gain from that stability.
Lastly, let me just ask you, on the subject of Yemen, you met with the UN envoy very recently. Do you still believe that the Stockholm Agreement is the best way forward? And why are some and so many critics saying that it's just a ploy? How would you respond to them?
We had an excellent meeting with Martin Griffith a few days in Abu Dhabi. We support fully the Stockholm Agreement. We think that it is really the window of opportunity for a political solution in Yemen. In the current situation where the UN is working for a Houthi pullout from the ports and the city, we know that it's an imperfect situation, but we know that the other options are more dire. So clearly we are working very hard to sort of enlarge the window of opportunity and make sure that we can actually use that. It is time for us to turn the page in Yemen. It is time for us to start the political process. But again, the Houthis are not helping politically. We saw their callous attack on Saudi civilian installations. And clearly, this is a large part of why confidence is not in them. Regardless, it's an imperfect situation, but we have full support for UN efforts. We have full support for Martin Griffith. And we think it is essential that the Houthi pullout from the ports doesn't become a farce or a ploy by a snapback or anything like that. And I think here the UN needs to work very hard to do that. And we need to help the UN to build on that because it is time to turn the page and move forward with a political resolution of the crisis.
Dr. Gargash, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.